Again, just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. Now, Russia's calling up more soldiers to join the fight, and the Kremlin is organizing a sham referenda to try to annex parts of Ukraine, an extremely significant violation of the UN Charter.
Good morning, our dear viewers. Once again, a warm welcome to this media. It has been a far cry since we last made a video of its kind, but we are back once again in high gear. My name is Johnny Vianney, and I'm a student of journalism, presenter to this platform, and at times I serve as a moderator. So basically, a lot of things have happened along the way since we last met. But probably here we talk about the global analysis, we talk about the global politics, but we always give a respect to things that have happened in our country, Uganda. So today, basically, we are going to be talking about the African perspective about the Russia-Ukrainian war. You know, it was a Friday, 24th of February 2023. It marked a full year since this war began. So along the way, a lot of things have happened. Many of us thought that the war is going to be ending just a meantime, just like 2 weeks, but they had a grace period of about a full year. So we really want to understand what has been the perspective of African countries. You know, this war has concerned us very much because, you know, last time you had the issues of the skyrocketing prices of fuel, cooking oil, and even other items within the country and even outside East Africa and Africa at large. So it is really a great concern to African countries. We want to understand what has been their perspective about this war. And again, we shall be looking into the effects of this war because we really understand, you and I, there are a lot of things that have happened. We have been all dismayed by the occurrence of this war. We have seen a lot of devastation of properties. We have seen killing of civilians and many in uniform. So we really want to understand what is the impact of this war within the African continent. We have seen the double standard of African countries. Many of African countries lack a common position about this war. So we really want to digest, we want to percolate and scrutinize about these issues. So wish you a good listening. Thank you so much. To begin with, you know, as I've told you, it has marked a full year ever since this war began, and we saw the president of United States of America, Joe Biden, making a courtesy visit to Ukraine. Many of us, we saw it as a surprise visit. We didn't expect him to visit Ukraine, as you know that the insecurity in this country. But it was not a surprise visit to some of us because before he's going into Ukraine, the information shows that he notified Russia about his appearance in Ukraine. So him notifying Russia about going to Ukraine was really important because if anything occurred without notifying Russia and Russia continued its operations as usual, as a normal day, it could be another side of the story. We could be talking about different things today. But he notified Russia about his appearance in Ukraine, but majority of African countries and even other countries on the globe, they didn't know that he's going to Ukraine. And actually, many of the Western media and the Eastern media platforms were aware about his appearance when he had already left. By then he was in Poland. He was in Poland by the time we all understood that he was in Ukraine. So we shall be looking at what they said, what he promised to Volodymyr Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine. So we shall be also looking into that. But before going into that, as I told you, we want to look at the African perspective, the African common position about this war. To begin with Uganda, because this is our mother country, so we really need to understand its position about the war. According to me, I'm seeing a double standard position about Uganda, because as we know, the treating general of Uganda, Mr. Ukrainewar, usually see him on Twitter saying that he is in solidarity with Russia, according to the statement he usually makes. But when they went to the United Nations during the General Assembly, the time of voting about the motion on the war, so Uganda decided to abstain. It did not show any side. So you see how Uganda is a double standard country. And just of recent, I think it was again last week, we were aware about the conversation of Mr. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni and Vladimir Zelensky. I heard the two had a phone call conversation. I don't know what they said, but I don't think he showed that great support to Ukraine. So Uganda is always double standard. We lack a common position. So that is the problem with our country. And I don't know, but we shall be looking into it. And it is a common scenario with majority of African countries. Because according to this voting, as I've told you, you will see that 141 countries voted against Russia's invasion. But you'll find that 32 countries decided to abstain. Then 70 countries voted in favor of Russia's invasion. But let us first look into the countries that abstained. We find that among the countries that decided to abstain, African countries were about 17 countries. Now you see the problem. Majority of the African countries, when it comes to voting, they decided to abstain. And Uganda was inclusive among those countries. But according to me, briefly, there are two reasons as why these countries are deciding to abstain. One, we saw during the period of colonialism, Russia played a very much role. It played a fundamental role about criticizing colonialism in African countries. So, I can talk about the 1994, during the end of the apartheid policy in South Africa. We saw, if you read Mandela's book called The Long Walk to Freedom, you'll find that Mandela talked about the ways how Russia helped African countries to obtain independence or to end up the apartheid policy in South Africa. And that's why we always faced a critical approach with the West during the period of the apartheid policy, because of condemning Mandela's crew, the likes of Nelson Mandela, the likes of Desmond Tutu, and even other Pan-Africans that helped South Africa to get independence. The world is having antagonism, confrontation with the whites that were supporting the apartheid policy in South Africa, because Russia had an hidden hand, had that hidden support to end apartheid policy in South Africa. So such countries in Africa, it is not easier to forget such days of colonialism and then the apartheid policy. So that's why they're deciding to abstain, not to show a critical approach or to confront Russia about its invasion in Ukraine. Then the second point that maybe we can talk about, we'll find that majority of the military weapons or the military attires are imported in Russia. So Russia is the largest exporter of these military weapons within Africa, with Uganda inclusive. So you can't take a critical approach to such a country that usually sells you the military weapons. Also, just because these weapons are very cheap, you usually see the drones we are having here, the military tanks and so on, they are very cheap, and majority of them are outdated. Because if you see the weapons we are having in Uganda today, the drones usually see Museveni makes them to hover around around the sky. Majority of these weapons were used in the Second World War, so we shouldn't fear. They shouldn't be a threat to us because they are outdated. So you see that a majority of those weapons are imported in Africa because they are very cheap, and at times they are very outdated. So such weapons, such scenarios at times make African countries to fail showing a critical approach towards Russia. So we can talk about that. Then secondly, another country, maybe Kenya, it also abstained. Yeah, it also abstained. according to the foreign minister, as I will be showing you the video, when he went to the General Assembly in the United Nations, he showed that he's criticizing what Russia had done to invade Ukraine. But probably when the time of voting came, he decided to abstain because of the reasons that I've told you. But looking into the countries that decided to show a critical approach towards the West, or that decided to, in the broad daylight, to show that they are in favor of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are having some African countries. My information shows me about 2 countries, and that is we are having Eritrea, and we're also having Mali. But it is also understandable. For them, they came out without fear or favor of anybody and decided to support Russia. But looking into Eritrea, you all understand they're having a dictatorial leadership. They're having a ruling that has been in power since 1993 under President Afwich. So for him, ever since he came in power, he has been showing a critical approach towards the Western countries, the capitalist states, the likes of US, the likes of Great Britain, France, Germany, and so on. So for him, has been supported by Russia ever since when he came to power. You get the point? And he has been a dictator because ever since they got independence from Ethiopia by 1993, remember that fracas, the wars they had, because they got independence out of fighting. Yeah, and we all know the theory behind how states are established, because we usually say that it is war that created the state, and at the end of the day, the states created the war, at the time we are seeing in Ukraine. So Eritrea got independence out of fighting with Ethiopia, and then they became autonomous. So they became independent from the mainland of Ethiopia. But history shows that they were helped by Russia, and that is one. And then again, with starting this dictatorial regime from 1993 up to today, it is because of the support of Russia. Because ever since this regime was established, they have never had any election, any you can imagine. They don't have the political institutions, they don't have a parliament, they are not under multi-party politics, and so on, as we talk about the liberal democracies. So their leadership ever since then up to today has been in favor of Russia. So there is no way how such a state could could decide to abstain or to vote against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So you see the scenario. And then the other country which decided to side with Russia, it is Mali. And we all know Mali, what is happening right now. There are a lot of military coups in the western side of Africa. We have seen it where it happened in Burkina Faso. Actually, we have had it too in Burkina Faso. We had it also in Chad. We had it the one that happened in Mali itself, and even in Guinea Conakry, the Kano Domboya. You know what happened. But usually there are a lot of military coups in West Africa, whereby we are seeing the Anglophone countries are having issues with the Francophone countries. There is also the Russophone countries, as we shall digest. But probably it shows that majority of these coups are being supported by either the West or the Eastern side with Russia on top. So for the category, to be specific about Mali, they had a military coup. It was around 2020, whereby Assimi Goïta decided to overthrow, to depose the duly elected government. But after some time, they established the so-called transition government. But again, after just in the brink of an eye, he decided also to overthrow the transition government, and then right now is the president of Mali. So Assimi Goïta is being supported by Russia to organize such military coups in the country. And again, it was just of recent, I think it was January, we saw that the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov Sergey, made a courtesy visit to majority of African countries, maybe to build a relationship, a solidarity. So we saw that Sergey Lavrov made a courtesy visit to Mali, and he showed us, or he said during the press conference, that he has been supporting, or Russia has been supporting majority of West African countries, not to organize military coups, but to fund its institutions, and then in terms of the military and then the humanitarian aid. So this usually shows us that these coups have been supported by Russia, and this explains our opinion that Mali decided to vote in favor of Russia, because Russia has been a very colleague, has been an ally of Mali. So let us have a short break and then we shall be coming back. Thank you.
Ukraine is not Russia. Ukraine will never be Russia. So fuck off, Putin.
I welcome you back from that short commercial break. Once again, we're still talking about the African perspective, about the Russia-Ukrainian war. We really want to understand what is their common position, as we have seen for the case of Uganda and Kenya, probably in East Africa tonight. So at this juncture, at this moment, I want us to talk about the common position, or the position of the African Union as a mother body, as an organization that combines African countries, about 54, or some can say 55 or 56. So it depends on how you see things. But you want to see the common position of the African Union. But probably, as we know, the African Union, it is just, how can I call it? It is a toothless entity. It is not even a barking dog, but it is a sleeping dog, because it is a puppet. You find that it is just a stooge of the West. It is just a sycophant of Western countries. It lacks that independent decision. It lacks making autonomous decision, or having a common position about anything. So just has been the period, or that has been the scenario all along the history. For example, we're having a lot of issues within the African continent. On this black continent, we're having a lot of civil wars, confrontation, but we have not seen the African Union coming out with a common voice. I will give you a case of 2011 during NATO's attack of Libya. Where was African Union? We did not hear any statement, only critical, or any report that is trying to criticize what NATO did. If it is there, now what did they do to see that they end the occurrence of NATO's invasion into Libya? So they lack that manpower. Then I can talk about, as I've told you, the military coups in the West. East Africa, the African Union is also quiet. It's trying to establish, how do you call them? They are just ceremonial or titular restrictions on these countries. But at the end of the day, they can't force such countries to end these military coups that are happening in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Chad, in Guinea-Conakry, and so on. So again, we're also having civil wars in Congo. For all long, since 1997 up to today, we have been having these civil wars in Congo. But where is the African Union? Nowhere to be seen. Talk about Ethiopia, where it has its headquarters. We're having a civil war between the Tigray and the government of Ahmed Abiy. But where is African Union? It's also quiet. So, asking the common position of African Union about Russia-Ukrainian war is just a disservice. You can't get a point of departure. It's like asking a very big thing that cannot be worded to you. So that is its problem, and usually it is because of its capacity. You look at its capacity and then its member country. Looking into its capacity, you find that the annual budget of the African Union in the year of 2022-2023, it is just worth $650 million. But if we are to compare with the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and I heard right now is not the richest man in the world, but we can use him, his annual income is just $2,400 million. So it is even times, I don't know how many times, or 5 or 3. So you see, this is the entity, this is the capability of the organization that you want to back, or that you want to have a common position about the Russia-Ukrainian war. And you find that 3/4 of this amount is just from aid. It will come from organizations like European Union and even the West. So it lacks capacity to talk about or to have a critical approach or a point of departure or a common opinion about the Russia-Ukrainian war. Still, look at these member countries, the 54 countries or plus. So majority of these countries are filtrated or are infiltrated by a lot of problems. They're having objective poverty, they're having food insecurity, they're having political problems because the problem of Africa is governance. So majority of these countries are having a lot of issues. Look at Uganda. Look at the country like Uganda, abductions, killings, election frauds and bribery, and so on. And currently we're having the issue of the iron sheet scandal, whereby the resources that were meant for poor regions like Karamoja, we are shared like a wedding cake among these very richest people in the country, including the Prime Minister, the Speaker, the Minister for Finance, and so on. So if you're having such issues, and sheet scandal whereby very rich people are sharing the resources of the poor, so these countries come together into one group, so it becomes a miserable group. It becomes a group of the afflicted. So how would the African Union have the capacity or the potentiality to have a common position about this war? So you see, it is a problem, and I think it was Machiavelli who said that if a country is to have a position or to have an impact in the international system, so it has to have a stable domestic political system. So if you don't have a stable domestic political system, there is no way how you are going to influence on the international level. And that's why the African Union lacks a point of departure. It lacks a common position. So as we end, we look into the way forward for this war or for the African perspective. One, if African countries want to have a common position or to have the capability and the capacity to dominate, they must clean their houses. Yeah, that is the only solution. We must come to the drawing board. There are issues we shouldn't talk about right now. So there is an issue of food insecurity in Africa, but how does it come into existence? Yet Africa has the best climate if you compare to other continents. But we're having the problem of food insecurity because of the occurrence of the Russia-Ukrainian war. You see, it is unfortunate, it's really solitary and absurd. So we need to come to the drawing board. If at all we want to influence, we need to eradicate such issues that refuse us from dominating. Because I hear always the so educated African presidents saying that, you know, we are independent. We're having independence. We can do things on our way. We can do what you want. But my dear, I want to tell you that you don't influence because you are independent. No, the issue is, what are you bringing on the drawing board? If we go to negotiations, what is your bargaining power? Is it that because right now majority of the resources in Uganda are into loans, 50% of the economic resources can be taken right now because we're having a lot of debts. Always you are debt servicing. So how are you going to influence? So the problem comes from the member states of the African Union. At the end of the day, it will lack the common position. So the way forward for the war, of course, it is diplomacy. Yeah, because it is either diplomacy or war. The reason that's why the two countries went into confrontation, it is because they failed to agree. They failed to come to the round table and discuss about the issues. So failure to make diplomatic relations, because that is what is supposed to be done. If you read the UN Charter, I think it is Article 1, which talks about peace and peace stability, whereby no country is supposed to encroach on the territory of the other. Yeah, so they have to come back to the drawing board and discuss according to the Pacific Settlement of Disputes in the United Nations Charter. So they have to do that if at all they want to end this war. But the issue has been always which country is going to call upon this diplomatic talks, because Russia doesn't want to show that it has been defeated to call such negotiations. So it is a problem. So each country doesn't want to call such talks. And according to my perspective, I see that this war, it will be like what is happening in Syria, because ever since 2011 up to today, this country has been in civil wars, and the issue is about leadership. Yeah, we saw the West wanted to overthrow the current government of Bashar al-Assad, but because Assad was helped by Russia, up to today is in power. But there are a lot of military groups there fighting against this government. They want to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, but because of the efforts being done by Russia up to today, this country is still surviving under the dictatorial tyranny of dictatorial tenure of Bashar al-Assad. So it will happen like for Ukraine. They can be like this up to when, and I don't know. But the war is always, it has to come to an end. But it can reach a time when it is dormant, when you're having just a few attacks. Yeah, so it can be like that up to the end of this world. But at the end of the day, as I've told you, it must be ended by diplomacy. Ukraine has to forget about joining NATO, because this is a problem which has caused a lot of fracas amongst these countries. And when it joins NATO, you know what will happen? It becomes a threat to Russia, because these are like brothers and sisters. Majority of people in Ukraine, they are also in Russia. You find that Ukraine has the Russians, at the same time it has the Ukrainians. The same applies to Russia. It has the Russians, at the same time the Ukrainians. So when it joins NATO, it becomes a potential threat to the security of Russia, because I remember it was 2008 when the same scenario happened, because Georgia is also a neighborhood of Russia. They also wanted to join in NATO, but for it was just silenced in a few weeks, about 2 weeks. Russia did the same thing. He declared a special operation, as Putin always says, because for him he doesn't call this war as a war. It's just a special operation in Ukraine. So he did the same. He invaded Georgia in the same scenario, overthrew the current government by then, and then some territories were cut off from Georgia. The territories of South Ossetia, the territories of Abkhazia, they were cut off from Georgia to make it weak. Yeah, these territories were declared independent. However much they are not legally recognized by the United Nations, but these are independent states with governments. So Putin thought that he would do the same in Ukraine, but this became a futile. It became problematic, because this time around Ukraine was supported by majority of the Western countries, with USA on the front. So after failing the plan A of overthrowing the government in Kiev of Volodymyr Zelensky, what he decided to do is declaring Party B. And his Party B was doing the same for Georgia, cutting off some important territories from Ukraine to make it weaker and forget about joining NATO. These territories include, remember, the problem with Mariupol, very important. It's an important port when it comes to importation and exportation of commodities. It was cut off. The Crimean territory, remember 2014, we talk about the Donbass, the Luhansk, Kherson, and even other territories. So these territories were cut off from Ukraine as the plan B of Russia to make it weak, to forget about joining NATO. But to make matters worse, actually even organized the fabricated and manipulated elections in these territories that let the people. Putin wanted to do it diplomatically to make these states vote and declare that right now we are autonomous from Ukraine. But the elections were fabricated and manipulated, as we saw that for him, he said 98% of people in such territories decided to join with Russia. And his plan was that if they accept to join Russia, then Ukraine continues fighting for these territories. It will be a direct attack on this. It will be a direct attack on Russia. So it could be another story. But to make matters worse, Volodymyr Zelensky continued fighting for these territories, and up to today. If you had Joe Biden when he made a surprise visit in Ukraine, he said that half of these territories that were formerly taken by Russia are now in the hands of Ukraine. So the end of the war has to be diplomacy. That is the way forward we can talk about if you have to end the war. And Ukraine has to remain neutral. Yeah, and I don't know whether right now it is possible because it has remained neutral. Yeah, according to the Minsk agreement they made in 2014 when Russia joined, when Russia decided to invade Crimea. Yeah, they went to Belarus in the capital of Minsk, and they decided that let Ukraine forget about joining NATO. Let it remain neutral. Let Ukraine doesn't show any side. If you don't want to ally with Russia, okay, it's fine, well and good. But don't also ally with the West. You be neutral, don't belong to any side. But right now, I don't know whether it is possible because we have seen the Western countries have helped a lot. They have done a remarkable and a fundamental job. They have done the concerted effort to see that they help Ukraine to fight against Russia. Because if it was not such territories, Ukraine, it could be another conversation right now. But after such territories, all countries helping Ukraine, right now you can't argue. You can't talk about the stupid talks of Ukraine remaining neutral to end this war. So let us look for the way forward. You and I, let's keep watching the space to see what is going to happen. Yes.
Mr. Vian, taking you back in time.
Yes, please.
About the issue of this war in Ukraine now. Don't you think this war is divided alongside ideologies? You remember the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. Don't you think Russia is trying to gain back its pride it had before as Eastern Bloc? And don't you think following that kind of ideological differences, don't you think the war will take long to be solved? Or don't you think these two powers, I mean the Western and the Eastern blocs, have to sit as two major blocs, excluding some other peripherals like the African countries, but them as two main blocs? Yes, may come to know.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Dongo Frank, my camera operator today, about that question. Yeah, you are right. You are 100% correct because this war is dominated by ideologies, as we saw in the Cold War politics. Yeah, and to take you back about that scenario, we all know that the reason as why the Soviet Union that considered that had the amalgamation of about 15 states with Ukraine inclusive, it was devastated, or it was disorganized and made to collapse or disintegrated by the West. It was because of the efforts of USA, Britain, and its ally that led to an end of the Soviet Union. So don't think that Russia was happy up to today. It wasn't happy, my dear. Yeah, because the countries I'm talking about, the likes of Ukraine, it was part of Soviet Union. Actually, it was the second largest. Georgia, it was also part of that pact. So Russia, I think, is fighting back. It wants to revive the communism thing, especially in the East. Because by then, Putin was also around. By then, he was under the military intelligence, the KGB, if you remember. So Putin was under that intelligence cooperation in the Soviet Union. So he was around. He was aware of what the West did to end communism in this country. So I think he also wants to dominate. It wants also to bring back the communism, especially on its neighbors, because the agreement was between Russia and the West, or the NATO members. It was that let you stop expansion, because right now there are about 30 countries in NATO, but the agreement was let you stop about the 30 countries, don't add any country, especially from the East. So the more the Western countries add other countries in the NATO, it becomes a threat to these countries. Yeah, and especially when they are neighbors when they are neighbors of Russia. Because just of recent, we had also Finland and Sweden. They want to join in NATO. Never mind, they have not fully concluded, as we shall see, but they applied, and 28 countries out of 30 have accepted these countries to join NATO. Some countries have not yet accepted, the likes of Turkey, and Indonesia, because of the reasons which we shall not digest here, but they have not accepted the proposal of these countries to join in NATO. Get the point? Because after seeing the occurrence of this war, so they saw that in the near future, Russia will again become a threat to Finland and Sweden, because they're also neighboring countries of Russia. So what they did, they applied to join NATO. You see how the thing is very big. So this war will not end actually. It can end physically, the actual fighting, but ideologically, it will not end. Yes, thank you so much for that question. And as I've told you, the only solution is diplomacy. With that, I think we can end this debate, and we wish you good luck. Thank you.